Why is my mom's photo in your mansion? The question that would change everything came from the lips of a 12-year-old girl in a donated dress, standing in a billionaire's marble foyer, staring at a photograph that shouldn't have existed. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's go back to where it all began. The Anderson estate sat on 15 acres of perfectly manicured lawns overlooking the Pacific Ocean in Malibu, California. Tonight, the mansion glittered with lights for the annual Children's Hope Foundation Gala, an event where Los Angeles' wealthiest gathered to write checks and feel good about themselves while sipping champagne that cost more per bottle than most people's monthly rent. Robert Anderson stood on his terrace, looking out at the ocean, a glass of scotch in his hand that he hadn't touched. At 54 years old, Robert was worth $4.2 billion, earned through a combination of tech investments, real estate, and the kind of business acumen that turned everything he touched to gold. He wore a custom tuxedo that fit perfectly, his silver hair styled impeccably, his face showing the kind of confidence that came from never having to worry about anything as mundane as money. But tonight, Robert felt restless, anxious. These galas had become routine, meaningless. Rich people congratulating themselves for donating money they'd never miss. He'd stopped seeing the actual cause years ago. The children these events supposedly helped had become abstract. Numbers on a report, tax deductions. Mr. Anderson, his assistant, Caroline, appeared at his elbow. The children from the outreach program have arrived. Would you like to greet them? Every year, the foundation brought a group of underprivileged children to the gala, a carefully staged photo opportunity that made donors feel their money was making a difference. Robert usually shook a few hands, took some pictures, and retreated to his study. "Fine," Robert said, downing his scotch. "Let's get this over with." He walked back inside the grand foyer, where 15 children stood in a nervous cluster, all dressed in their Sunday best, which meant donated clothes that mostly fit and shoes that had been handed down. They looked overwhelmed by the opulence surrounding them, by the crystal chandeliers and marble floors, and the kind of wealth they'd only seen in movies. Robert moved through them mechanically, shaking hands, saying the right things, his smile perfect and empty, until he reached the last child in line. She was maybe 12, small for her age, with dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore a purple dress that was slightly too big, and shoes that were slightly too small. But it was her eyes that caught Robert's attention. Dark brown eyes that held something he hadn't expected. Not awe at his wealth, not nervousness. Just a quiet, assessing intelligence. "What's your name?" Robert asked his practice question. "Lily," the girl said. Her voice was soft but steady. "Lily Martinez." "Well, Lily welcomed my home. I hope you enjoy the evening." Robert started to move past her, the interaction complete, the photo opportunity fulfilled. But Lily didn't move out his way. Instead, she was staring past him at something on the wall behind him. Her face had gone pale, her eyes wide with shock. "That photo," Lily whispered, pointing with a trembling finger. "Why do you have that photo?" Robert turned to see what she was looking at. On the wall of his foyer, among dozens of photos from his travels and business ventures, hung a framed photograph from 26 years ago. The photo showed a much younger Robert, maybe 28, standing outside a small diner in East L.A. Beside him stood a young woman, maybe 25, with dark hair and kind eyes. Both were smiling, covered in paint, holding paintbrushes. Robert had taken that photo during a volunteer day early in his career, back when he was still trying to make his first million, back when he still did things because they mattered rather than because they looked good. He'd helped repaint that diner as part of a community service project. The woman in the photo had been there too, volunteering her Saturday. He barely remembered the day. The photo had hung on his wall for years, one of many, a reminder of who he'd been before the billions, before he'd forgotten how to see people as people rather than as networking opportunities or tax deductions. "That's just an old photo from a volunteer event," Robert said dismissively. "Why do you ask?" Lily's eyes filled with tears. "Because that's my mom. That's my mom when she was young. I have the same photo at home." She's kept it in a frame by her bed my whole life." Robert felt the floor tilt beneath him. He looked at the photo again, really looked at it, and then looked at Lily. The resemblance was striking. The same dark hair, the same eyes, the same delicate bone structure. "What's your mother's name?" Robert asked, his voice suddenly hoarse. "Sofia Martinez," Lily said, wiping her eyes. "She talks about this day sometimes. Says it was one of the happiest days of her life. She helped paint a diner with a young man who dreamed of changing the world. She said he was kind, said he saw her as a person, not just as a poor volunteer. She's kept that photo for 26 years. Robert's heart hammered in his chest. Sofia. He remembered her now, the memory flooding back with startling clarity. She'd been beautiful and funny and passionate about helping her community. They'd spent the whole day painting that diner, talking about dreams and life and what they wanted to become. He'd been attracted to her, had asked for her number, but then his phone had rung. His first big investor. A meeting that couldn't wait. He'd left in a rush, promising to call, to find her again, and then he'd gotten busy. The deal had led to another deal. Success had led to more success. And Sofia Martinez had become a memory he'd buried under 26 years of wealth accumulation and forgotten humanity. "Where is your mother now?" Robert asked. Lily's expression shifted from shock to something sadder. "She's home. She's sick. Has been for 2 years. Breast cancer. She can't work anymore. We lost our apartment 6 months ago. We've been staying at a shelter." The words hit Robert like physical blows. While he'd been building his empire, forgetting about a kind young woman who'd volunteer beside him one Saturday, that woman had been fighting cancer, losing her home, raising a daughter alone in poverty. "She never told me about that day," Lily continued, her voice breaking. "Not really. Just that she'd once met someone who made her believe good people existed. That kindness was real. She said that memory kept her going through hard times. I never knew it was you. I never knew the man from her favorite photo was this." She gestured at the mansion, at the opulence, at the gala happening in the ballroom, where people who'd never struggled for anything congratulated themselves on their charity. Robert felt something crack open in his chest, a door he'd sealed shut years ago. A part of himself he'd buried under success and wealth, and the comfortable numbness of never having cared about anything that truly mattered. Robert canceled the rest of his evening. He called his driver, told Caroline to handle the gala, and did something he'd never done before. He asked Lily to take him to her mother. They drove through Los Angeles as the sun set, from the impossible wealth of Malibu to neighborhoods that got progressively rougher, more worn down, more forgotten. Lily sat in the back of Robert's Mercedes, looking small and out of place in her donated dress, staring out the window at a world she knew but Robert had stopped seeing. The shelter was in East L.A., a converted church that now housed 43 families who'd fallen to the cracks of American prosperity. The building was old but clean, maintained by volunteers and donations and the exhausted determination of people who decided homelessness didn't mean losing dignity. Lily led Robert inside, past families eating donated food in a community dining room, past children doing homework on floors because there weren't enough tables. Robert followed in his tuxedo, feeling obscene, feeling like an alien in this world he left behind and never looked back at. They reached a small room on the second floor. Lily knocked gently and pushed open the door. Sofia Martinez sat propped up in a narrow bed, and 4-line running to her arm from a portable stand. She looked both older and exactly the same as she had in that photo. Her dark hair was thin now, her face gone from illness and treatment. But her eyes, when they met Robert's, were the same kind eyes from 26 years ago. "Mom," Lily said softly, "you won't believe this. The gala tonight was at his house. The man from your photo. The one from the diner." Sofia stared at Robert, recognition dawning slowly, followed by disbelief, followed by tears. "Robert," she whispered, "is that really you?" Robert moved closer, feeling his throat tighten. Sofia, I'm so sorry. I promised to call. I promised to find you again. I got busy and I forgot, and I'm so sorry. Sofia shook her head, smiling through her tears. You were chasing your dreams. I understood. I hoped maybe you'd call. But I understood. You were going to do great things. And you did. Look at you. You became everything you said you would. At what cost? Robert asked, his voice breaking. I forgot about you. I forgot about that day. I forgot what it felt like to care about people, to see them, to be human. I built an empire, and I forgot everything that mattered. He sat down in the chair beside her bed, and suddenly he was telling her everything. About the 26 years. About the billions. About the empty mansion and the meaningless galas, and the way he'd stopped seeing people as people. About how seeing Lily tonight, seeing that photo, remembering Sofia, had cracked open something he'd sealed shut. Sofia listened, holding his hand with her thin fingers, and when he finished, she smiled sadly. You haven't lost yourself, Robert. You just forgot for a while. But Lily found you. Maybe that's not an accident. Maybe that's life giving you a chance to remember. Tell me about your life, Robert said. Please, tell me what happened after that day. And Sofia did. She'd worked as a teacher for 15 years, loving it, making a difference in kids' lives in East L.A., the same neighborhood where she'd grown up. She'd gotten married, had Lily, gotten divorced when her husband decided fatherhood was too hard. She'd been doing okay until the cancer diagnosis 3 years ago. The treatments had taken all her savings. She'd lost her job because she couldn't work, lost her apartment because she couldn't pay rent, ended up here, in a shelter, trying to give Lily as normal a childhood as possible while fighting a disease that was slowly winning. I'm not giving up, Sofia said, her voice fierce despite her weakness. Lily deserves better than this. She's brilliant, Robert. Straight A's. Reads at 10th grade level. Wants to be a doctor someday. She deserves chances I can't give her anymore. Robert looked at Lily, who sat quietly in the corner, and saw himself at that age. Brilliant, but poor. Full of potential, but trapped by circumstances. He'd gotten lucky, had someone invest in him, had caught the right break at the right time. But he'd forgotten, after escaping poverty, to reach back and help others climb out. What if I could help? Robert asked, what if I could give Lily those chances? Give you the treatment you need? Would you let me? Sofia's eyes filled with tears. Robert, I can't ask that of you. You're not asking. I'm offering. Sofia, you gave me something 26 years ago. A reminder that kindness exists, that good people exist. A memory you kept for 26 years that kept you going through hard times. Let me give you something back. Not charity, not pity, just one person helping another because it's right. The next morning, Robert did something he'd never done in his 30 years of business. He canceled everything for a week. Every meeting, every call, every obligation. He devoted himself entirely to helping Sofia and Lily. He moved them out of the shelter within 24 hours. Not to some impersonal hotel, but to the guest house on his estate. Sofia protested, said it was too much, but Robert insisted. Lily needed stability. Sofia needed comfort while fighting her illness. And Robert needed to do this, needed to remember what it felt like to help someone for no reason other than that they needed help. He hired the best oncologist in Los Angeles, got Sofia into a treatment program at Cedars-Sinai, paid for everything without blinking, because what good was money if you couldn't use it to save someone's life? He enrolled Lily in a private school near his estate, not because public school wasn't good enough, but because she deserved every advantage, every opportunity to develop her brilliant mind. He saw her light up when she talked about science and medicine, and he remembered being that age, being that smart, being trapped by poverty until someone gave him a chance. But something else happened during that week. Something Robert hadn't expected. He changed, spending time with Sofia and Lily, hearing their stories, seeing how they'd maintained kindness and dignity despite every hardship, reminded Robert of who he'd been at 28. The young man who'd volunteered on Saturdays, who believed business success and helping people could coexist, who'd wanted to change the world, not just profit from it. He'd become so focused on building his empire that he'd forgotten why he wanted to build it in the first place. Not for the wealth itself, but to have the power to make a difference. And somewhere along the way, he'd stopped using that power for anything that mattered. Sofia, even weak from treatment, called him out on it one evening as they sat on the terrace watching the sunset. Lily was doing homework inside, and Sofia had insisted on getting out of bed to see the ocean. "You built something incredible, Robert," Sofia said, her voice thoughtful. "But it's empty, isn't it? All this wealth, all this success, and you're not happy. I can see it in your eyes." Robert didn't deny it. "I forgot what matters. I thought making money was the goal. But you, fighting cancer, living in a shelter, raising an incredible daughter alone, you're happier than I've been in years. How is that possible?" "Because I have purpose," Sofia said simply. "I have Lily. I have love. I have something worth fighting for. Money can't buy that, Robert, but it can enable it. You have all this wealth. Imagine what you could do if you remembered how to use it to help people, not just writing checks at galas, but really seeing people, really helping them." Her words stayed with Robert long after she'd gone back to bed. That night, unable to sleep, he walked through his mansion, really seeing it for the first time in years. The opulence, the excess, rooms he never used, art he never looked at, wealth accumulated for its own sake rather than for any real purpose. He thought about Sofia, keeping his photo for 26 years. He thought about Lily, brilliant and kind despite growing up in poverty. He thought about the shelter full of families just as deserving as Sofia and Lily, but without anyone to help them. And he made a decision that would change everything. 3 months later, Robert stood in front of a newly opened building in East L.A., the Sofia Martinez Community Center, named after the woman who'd reminded him what actually mattered. The center offered free medical care, job training, educational programs, and temporary housing for homeless families. But this wasn't just another charity project for Robert. This was personal. He'd funded it entirely himself. He designed it with input from people who actually understood poverty and homelessness, not wealthy donors who thought they knew best. He'd hired staff from the communities they served, including several families he'd met at that shelter where Sofia and Lily had stayed. Sofia stood beside him at the ribbon cutting. Healthy again after successful treatment, color returned to her cheeks. Strength returned to her frame. The cancer was in remission. The doctors cautiously optimistic. She cried when Robert first told her about the center, about naming it after her. "Don't name a building after someone like me," Sofia had protested. "I'm nobody special. You're the person who saved me," Robert had replied. 26 years ago, you reminded me that kindness was real. And 3 months ago, you reminded me again when I'd forgotten completely. You're the most special person I know. Lily stood on Sofia's other side, wearing her new school uniform, holding her mother's hand. She'd thrived in the past 3 months, making friends, excelling in her classes, already talking about med school like it was a certainty rather than an impossible dream. Robert had set up an education fund for her, full ride through medical school, whatever she needed. But more than the money, he'd given her something else. Time, attention, mentorship. He'd taken her to his office, shown her how business worked, encouraged her dreams, believed in her potential. He'd become something like a father figure, filling a role that had been empty in her life. The crowd gathered for the center's opening was diverse. Wealthy donors Robert had convinced to invest in real change. Community members who'd helped design the programs. Families who'd already been helped by preliminary services. All of them together, celebrating something that actually mattered. When it was time for speeches, Robert stood at the podium and told the truth. 3 months ago, I was a billionaire who'd forgotten how to be human. I'd spent 30 years building wealth, and 0 years building anything that mattered. I wrote checks to feel good about myself, but I'd stopped seeing the people those checks supposedly helped. He paused, finding Sofia and Lily in the crowd. Then a 12-year-old girl looked at a photo in my house and asked a question that changed everything. Why is my mom's photo in your mansion? That question brought back a memory I'd buried, a memory of who I used to be before the billions. And it brought back the woman in that photo, who'd kept that memory alive for 26 years, who'd remember my kindness when I'd forgotten hers. Sofia wiped tears from her eyes as Robert continued. Sofia Martinez and her daughter Lily reminded me that wealth without purpose is just expensive emptiness. That success means nothing if you forget to help others. That we're all connected, and when we help each other, we're not diminishing ourselves. We're becoming who we're meant to be. He gestured at the building behind him. This center exists because a poor girl asked a rich man why he had her mother's photo. Because that question led to remembering. And remembering led to understanding what I'd lost in all my gaining. My humanity, my purpose, my connection to something bigger than myself. Robert looked out at the crowd, at the faces of people who'd struggled and survived, who'd needed help and received it, who'd maintained their dignity and kindness despite every hardship. We live in a world where people like me accumulate billions, while people like Sofia and Lily live in shelters. That's not right. That's not acceptable. And it's not inevitable. We have the resources to end homelessness, to provide health care, to give every brilliant child like Lily the chances they deserve. What we've lacked is the will, the remembering, the seeing of each other as human. He stepped away from the podium and walked to Sofia and Lily, putting his arms around both of them. "Thank you," he said, his voice breaking with emotion, "for asking that question, for keeping that photo, for reminding me who I was before I became rich, and for showing me who I can still become if I remember to stay human." The crowd applauded, but Robert barely heard it. He was thinking about that day 26 years ago, painting a diner with a young woman who believed kindness was real, about how he'd forgotten her and nearly forgotten himself, about how a 12-year-old girl had brought him back by asking a simple question about a photograph. 6 months after the center opened, Robert restructured his entire business philosophy. He created more community centers in cities across America. He established a foundation that didn't just write checks, but actually addressed systemic issues causing poverty and homelessness. He brought Sofia onto his board of directors, valuing her lived experience over the Ivy League credentials of his other advisors. And every Sunday, he had dinner with Sofia and Lily at his estate, not as a billionaire hosting charity cases, but as a family brought together by chance and kindness, and the strange way life sometimes brings people back together to teach us lessons we've forgotten